Cool. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second day of Indigi-Show. My name is Kayla Shaggy. I am the organizer. And today our session will be with Enoch Chapman. My hands had to move. And today he will be doing his session on intro to Native American flute playing. And then we'll have a Q&A later. So I'll hand it over to him.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be able to present here today for the Indigi-Show and all the other like little things that are going on with the show itself. Has actually been really fun to watch and engage with. And so I'm excited because usually when I go to conventions like this or see types of art shows, it's all about like the graphical design and the worlds of like comic book drawing and illustration and all the other really cool stuff. And I'm just not that world. I am a musician. I don't draw very well. My graphics are always very square, and my stick figures are always very horrible. So I'm always impressed with that world and want to be a part of it. But when I saw this, I thought, hey, maybe I can ask to be a presenter and maybe share a little bit of things that I like and things that I enjoy, like the Native American wood flute. And I was excited to be accepted. So hopefully I don't do the show a disservice by presenting a little bit of music here. Uh, so the Native American wood flute. I love this instrument. It's one of my favorite instruments. I started playing around the year 2000, and man, I fell in love with it. It is such a beautiful sound. Maybe I'll start off a little bit of that and just play a little bit for you, and then go into the presentation a little bit more. So here's just a little whatever I feel like playing right now. And that's the sound. I mean, it's pretty for people who are familiar with it. It's something that they're used to. You may have heard that over and over again in different types of films, especially if films have like a native part to it. They'll usually play some sort of native flute. Usually the Hollywood types will put in what's called a shakuhachi. It's a Japanese flute, and it's not a Native American wood flute. But if you don't know the difference, then you probably wouldn't recognize it. It's very similar to a lot of other Aboriginal flutes that are out there. Like I said, the shakuhachi is another one that's from Japan. There's another flute from Mali that's very similar in design and sound. And I mean, it's what you hear with a lot of like very beginning first world cultures when they start their music, mostly because it's the sound that you hear of wind blowing through like reeds and through wood pieces and things like that. It's great. I love it. It's one of my favorites. And like I said, I started playing probably like around 2000 and have been falling in love with it ever since. So let's talk a little bit about me, just so you know where I come from and who I am, and then we can talk a little bit about the instrument. It's kind of nice to know who it is who's presenting, and so I thought I'd start with that. My name is Enoch Chapman. I was born in El Salvador to the indigenous tribes in El Salvador, up in the mountains area. My tribe is the People tribe, PIPL. We are the last of the Aztec tribes that are out there, which is kind of fun and exciting. Being born in El Salvador and being born to the indigenous tribes in El Salvador, what that means is the United States government doesn't recognize me as a Native American because we are outside the boundaries of the United States. So I can't technically actually check off the Native American box, but I do whenever I can because I think it's great to be part Native American and recognize myself that way. I do have to check off also the Latin culture as well, so because Hispanic and everything, the way the United States government sees me. So, but it's fun to know that that's where I came from. I was adopted when I was 10 months old. So I was adopted when I was a baby to a wonderful Caucasian couple up in New Hampshire. And my whole family is Caucasian. Being adopted, I'm the only one who's different. New Hampshire is definitely not known for its widespread minority population. So moving up to New Hampshire, I was like one of 8 minorities up there. We had a weekly meeting to kind of, make sure that we were all okay and everything. Just kidding, that really didn't happen. But we did. It was a smaller minority community, to say the least. So which meant that I really didn't care that much about my culture when I was growing up, because everyone around me was not um, like me. I ended up caring a lot more about, I don't know, wanting to fit in and wanting to be just like everybody else. So this idea that I was native or had a cultural identity really didn't mean much to me as I was growing up. My parents tried very hard to get me into native culture, but I just didn't really care that much, partially because I just wanted to be like everyone else. And so I really didn't know anything about music or culture or anything like that while I was growing up. It just came to me later on in life. I started studying music when I was young. Around 5, I started playing piano and got into drums and got into a whole set of other different instruments. Ended up going to university on a music scholarship as a vocal performer. I don't sing anymore, but I actually used to sing a lot. And when I was there, I started studying education and composition. And I really fell in love with composition. The idea of creating music was something that was really important to me and something I thought that was really cool. And so I fell in love with compositions, fell in love with the idea of instrumentation, and then left college, moved out to Utah. So moved from New Hampshire to Utah to predominantly, Caucasian states. But the nice about Utah was there is a lot of there's a lot of cultures that have come into Utah. There's a huge Latinx community out here. There's a very, very strong Native American community here in Utah. So if you want to learn about different types of Indian cultures, it's a great place for me to start exploring and understanding some things. It was out here that I picked up my very first Native American wood flute. I was walking through the mall one day, and there was this native-owned little kiosk, and in there they had a flute. And the flute they had, and I can actually show you my very first flute, I had was this thing. And I ended up saying, that looks really cool, and I want to pick that up and I want to try playing it. And so I bought it, and I have had it ever since. That was around 1999. And I just started taking the instrument and started playing with it and seeing what came about. And it was really, really cool because it created a different sound that I wasn't used to. And it was very easy to pick up and play. And I fell in love with it. It's a great instrument, and it's unique. It's not something that a lot of people are very familiar with. A lot of people will go, "Oh, I recognize that sound," but they don't really know what that sound is. It's not something that's a very mainstream instrument in that fashion. You're not going to see a lot of people be like, "Hey, I play the Native American wood flute, and this is what I'm known for." So because of that, the instrument itself is relatively cool when you play it for other people. People get excited about it. They go, "Wow, that's a really neat sound, really neat idea. How can I learn more about that? How can I understand where you're coming from?" I have spent a lot of time going to different schools and going to different centers and just presenting ideas and topics about flute music and how to play it, and people always get really excited because it is just a unique sound, and it's a pretty sound that people haven't really all that been familiar with. So that's a little bit about me, and kind of where I came from. I figured before we get into the in-depth of some of the techniques and tricks that I want to show you, I thought I would share with you a little bit about how the flute is made, like how it's created in the different parts of the flute. It's good to know your instrument before you start playing it, so that you can say, "Oh, well, that's how the instrument is created, that's how it's formed, and that's how it's actually utilized." So let's talk a little bit about just the instrument itself. The flute is very simple. It's a tube, right? It's just a cylinder, long cylinder, and inside of it, you'll see there are 6 holes inside of my traditionally, native flutes come in 2 different flavors. One is a 6-hole variety, and the other flavor, and I'll pull it over from my little guy Lionel up here, is a 5-hole variety. This. Now, you'll notice with the 6-hole variety and the 5-hole variety that there is the slight difference. In the 5-hole variety, the 4th hole, and we count our holes from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4. This 4th hole is actually not there, it's covered. And on the 6-hole variety, you'll see that it's there, right? So on the 5-hole, that 4th hole is covered. And on the 6-hole, uncovered. Now, some flute manufacturers, when they send you the flute or when you buy the flute for the first time, will send you another strap. And this little strap will actually be covered over that 4th hole, and you tie it and you hold it down. And the reason for that is the way that you play the flute. It's very much easier to cover up that hole, and we'll talk about this a little later. But it's much easier to cover up the hole to start playing the flute. And this is a much more beginner flute than anything else. It's how you kind of start understanding the process of being able to play, which is good. It's exciting to be able to start playing and make things easier, and that's what that does. So there's 2 major varieties, like I said, the 6-hole flute and the 5-hole flute, but you'll also see 7-hole and 8-hole flutes. Now, these aren't really traditional in the world of Native American flute playing. They are more crossovers from the world of the recorder, the European instrument that a lot of people are familiar with, and it's crossovers from that we actually get the 7-hole and the 8-hole varieties. For the most part, the 6-hole and 5-hole varieties are what we're really used to, and what is considered traditionally native. 6-hole being more native, and the 5-hole being a beginner way of getting into it. There's also this hole up here, this is the mouthpiece, and so this is where we blow into. This is how we create the sound, and so this is our intake hole or a blow hole. And then on the opposite side of the flute, you'll see that there is just an open cylinder at the end. Now, this open cylinder is just a way for the flute air to kind of flow through the flute. It doesn't actually alter the sound production. It does create the sound to make it a little bit higher because the flute air can't flow through, but it's not going to stop the sound if I cover up that hole. So if I blow, and I cover that hole, I'm actually not stopping the sound production. What I am doing is stopping the flow of air to be able to go through the flute. So the sound doesn't come from here. The sound comes from this little guy up here. There's a little hole right up here, and that's where the sound hole is. Now, the mouthpiece has a chamber inside of it, and this chamber has a shelf that creates a whistle, and that whistle comes out this sound hole. So this sound hole is really important inside the way of creating and recording the flute. If I want to get the best sound, I want to put my microphone up to this sound hole as best as possible. And you can get little lavalier mics and other things like that to actually record, and they sit right here next to the sound hole, so you can get the purest sound possible. So you don't want to record the mic with the lower part. I want to the upper part and get a much better sound. That sound production comes from that sound hole up here. And so that's like, a bonus thing that you may not have ever thought about, but, something to make you more professional if you're actually going for that kind of professional sheen is to put the microphone and recording devices up towards the sound hole, not towards the lower end of the flute. And then the final piece of like the actual flute is this thing called the fetish. The fetish is important because it actually holds the air in to create the whistle. So the chamber here, the sound comes up into the flute and kind of whistles inside of here, and the fetish holds that air in so the whistle gets created. The fetish is, really all it needs to be is like one little kind of wooden piece right here. It doesn't really need to be much of anything else. But we carve it into different types of creatures, different types of animals. It doesn't actually have to be, but we do create different type of designs up there to make it interesting and living. Most of the times they're ideas of like birds. Like this is one flute that I have that has a bird carved into the head. This one has a little sparrow carved into it. So it is kind of more bird-esque, but it can be any type of design you want to. I've seen wolves, and I've seen bears, and I've seen turtles, and I've seen all sorts of different animals up there carved into the fetish itself. The main part of the fetish that's important is the fact that the air travels through here to create the whistle. The air is down so that the whistle can be generated. And that's primarily the parts of the flute. It's really not that difficult of an instrument to understand, but it is good to understand where sound comes from, where you can do things with the production of the noise that you're trying to create. There's also other things that you could put on the flute. Like I have a flute here that has a whole slew of different inlays and little carvings. These are just decorative functions. They don't really do anything to the flute. They don't affect the sound. They're just there to make the flute pretty. And so you can have a whole slew of designs carved into the flute, which is nice. The other thing that's really important about flute, especially when you're talking about like the Native American wood flute, is the material that's made out of. Now, Native American flutes can be made out of a bunch of different materials. First and foremost, it's wood. Wood is the primary material that we create the flutes out of and where we get the sounds from. And different woods have different sounds. And that's important to note that different types of woods will create different types of sounds. I have flutes that are made out of birch, and I have flutes that are made out of walnut, and flutes that are made out of cedar. And that's important because each of those types of woods will create a different sound. And you may not recognize it at the beginning, but as you start listening to it more, you'll start going, oh, okay, I can see where that flute, where that wood comes from and the different sound that that's producing. So the different woods are important inside of the flute. Sometimes the materials that make up the flute, like if you look into more like the Latinx world, you'll see that they're made out of clay. Sometimes you can find them made out of PVC pipe. You can find them made out of metal. All these different types of materials create different types of sound. The harder the material, the more, I guess some people call it harsher. I call it a little bit more direct sound. It's a little bit more distinct in the way that it's created, and versus softer materials. Softer materials would create a little bit more subtle sound, a little bit more softer attacks to it, a little bit more softer tonalities as you listen to the long tones. And so that's kind of important inside the world of flutes. Another thing that's important is the length. So this is an A here, and flute, you can see how long that it is inside of the window I'm showing you. I'm going to bring up my F sharp flute, which is a lower flute, and you'll try to put it side by side. You'll notice where the mouthpieces are that as I bring them to the links, that the F sharp flute is much longer. Longer instruments create lower sounds. That's a big thing to understand. Long instruments, lower sounds. So here's an F sharp flute, and then here's an F sharp flute. So I have one that is very, very small compared to the one that is pretty long, right? And with those two flutes combined together, right, I have my high flute and I have my low flute. I also have a big bass flute here as well, which is also an F sharp flute, which is the key. And that is this guy here. And this is a really long flute. If you can see it, I can't even put the whole thing into the picture, but this is a really, really long flute. And this is a bass flute. Again, the longer the flutes, the bigger the instrument, the lower the tone that you're going to get out of the instruments. The smaller the instruments, the higher the tone you're going to get out of the instruments. And so that's another big thing to understand, especially in the world of keys, is longer instruments create longer tones, smaller instruments create higher tones to be able to generate the right sounds that you're looking for. So wood sizes, the final piece of the puzzle, and this is where we're going to start talking about the things that are important for a player to begin with, is you. You, the performer, actually breathe life into the flute. The more you play the instrument, the more the instrument will conform to who you have moisture breath, you have in your breath contains particles of just water and kind of elements of you as you play into it. So as you play into these instruments, that water is going to adhere to the wood. Wood is a very porous material, and so it soaks up the water and soaks up moisture. That soaking up the water and the moisture actually creates a patina inside of the flute, or a sealant inside the flute. So the actual flute is created by the performer as well as the materials that make up the flute. And so the more the person plays into the flute, the more it's actually going to sound like that individual, whoever picks up the flute and starts playing into it. And which is very interesting because it's one of the few instruments that are out there that actually conforms to the performer as well as the performer conforming to it. There's a really interesting symbiosis between the two that allows it to grow with you as well as you grow with the instrument. I think it's really kind of cool, and I think it's kind of like a beautiful little sentiment. That sounds a lot more like me because of how I play this flute and how long I've been playing it than if someone else was to play the same type of pattern, which is interesting because, again, it's how you are creating your sound and how you are going to generate your way to be able to produce the best type of music that you can with the instrument itself. So that's exciting. Speaking of that, then we're going to start talking about the tips that you can use to help you create like a really cool professional sound. Like, what are these type of tips? Now, the first tip is really simple. It's very simple, similar to what I've just explained, and that's the idea of the breath. The breath for you is so important, and the breath is really important inside the Native American wood flute. It's probably the most important thing that we have inside of the wood flute. And breathing is something that we've probably all been doing our entire lives. To say that we haven't been breathing is probably, if you stop breathing for a little while, it's probably not necessarily the most healthy thing for you. So we all know what breathing is. It's not something that's new, but there are different techniques to the world of breathing to be able to help you get more air into your lungs, to help you get more air into your body so you can create better performances. And this is what's important because we don't really know these techniques as we start off breathing. We know how to normally just breathe. We put air in, put air out. And for the first part, when we start breathing, we actually use our chest a lot to fill up our lungs. So we'll breathe like this. And if you've ever been to a doctor's office or if you've ever been out of breath or anything, like you're probably used to that idea where you have to breathe in and you expel. In your chest, it kind of moves up and down. Now, that's not a bad way of breathing. It's not horrible by any means, but it doesn't fill up your lungs. Your lungs are this full part of the body. It covers up a pretty good portion of your upper torso. And when you breathe in using that kind of upper chest technique, you're really only breathing in probably about like 2/3 of the air that you can get into your body because you're missing about a lower 1/3 of the lung capacity that you have. The ability to fill up that lower lung capacity is actually using a muscle that you have called the diaphragm. And the diaphragm sits right below your belly line. I'd show you, but my belly is really big. I'm not going to stand up and show you, but it sits right below your belly line. That's where the diaphragm is. And the diaphragm, when you actually contract the muscle, like if you're lifting weights and you contract your muscles, when you contract the muscle, it actually pushes down instead of pushing up. It's a weird muscle that you would think would push up, but it doesn't. It actually pushes down. And then when it relaxes, it actually pushes up. Now, to get the best breath possible, you want to utilize that diaphragm. What people call engaging the diaphragm. And you want that diaphragm to be used as much as possible. So as you breathe, you want to push down and get the best air possible. And then when you release, your diaphragm is going to release and it's going to help expel the air out of your body. So as you breathe, you want to have your diaphragm push down. And then as you exhale, you're going to get a lot more air into your system that by using this diaphragm technique. You're also going to notice that as I breathe, my shoulders aren't moving when I use my diaphragm. It's a different type of technique. What ends up growing is your belly ends up growing. You end up getting a much bigger belly. So no shoulder movement, but all down my belly area. Now I'm going to push up with my diaphragm. I'm going to get more air out. And that's a way for you to be able to get more air into your body and have a much stronger breath control. If you want to see this in action, it's actually really simple. Take your fingers and take your hands and actually put your fingers like this so that you have your fingertips touching. Okay. And now put that right over your belly button. And then as you breathe in, expand your stomach so your diaphragm is being moved. And what you'll see is that your fingers, as you breathe in, will actually expand. Then as you exhale, your fingers are going to come back together. And that's a way that you can see how your diaphragm is actually being used to breathe. It's a very simple technique. You just put your fingers over there, breathe in, and exhale. And if your fingers are moving and your belly's expanding, then you're having your diaphragm more engaged in the process. If your fingers don't move, and you can breathe very easily by doing the same thing, instead of using diaphragm, just use your shoulders and your top part, your fingers don't move. So you're not activating your diaphragm. And that's fine. It's just another way of breathing. But by utilizing your diaphragm, you're getting more air into your body. The other thing we want to do is we want to create maybe some exercises to allow you to get the best air possible. So here's a very simple exercise to start learning how to control your air. What we're going to do is we're going to create a count. So we have a count, and then we're going to breathe in for 4 beats. We're going to hold for 2 beats, and then we're going to exhale for 4 beats. So I'm going to show you this, right? We're going to breathe in. We're going to hold and exhale. Very simple exercise. Try it with me. We're going to breathe in for 4, hold for 2, and exhale for 4. Ready? Now hold, now exhale. Very simple, really easy, right? And this is an exercise you can do on your own and learn how to get better breath control, okay? You're going to breathe in, you're going to hold, and then you exhale. And you can vary that type of combination up as much as you want to. Let's say you want to breathe in for 4 beats and try to exhale for 8 beats. So see if we can do that together. Ready? Now we're going to hold, and now exhale. Good. Very simple. Maybe you want to inhale for 2 beats, hold for 2 beats, and exhale for 4 beats. See if we can get a faster breath. We can do that too. Ready? Go. Hold and exhale. Super simple. Super easy. You guys are doing great. Okay. Now what we want to do is, you vary that up as you're trying to grow your techniques and trying to grow your breathing support and breathing control. As you breathe in for 4, exhale for 12. See if you can do that. Breathe in for 4, exhale for 10, or breathe in for 2 and exhale for as long as you can. The idea is trying to vary that up so that you're creating this pattern of breath control so you have a much stronger area to be able to. Oh, cool. This is good. I'm getting the long breath that I can. I can hold in as much air as possible, and then I can expel. When I was doing, a lot of breathing practices, a lot of breathing techniques for vocal performance, I was able to breathe in for 1 second and actually hold a note out for about 20 seconds, which is incredible. I mean, being able to have that type of control and breathing exercises is great. And just having this simple exercise where you can just count out beats is a good way to try to practice that. Get some breath in and see how long you can expel it for while also holding it. This is a good way for breath control. And it's one of the big things really important inside the world of Native American flute. A lot of professionals have great long tones. You can always tell good players because their long tones are awesome. They just are amazing. Not so good players have shaky long tones. But good players have these amazing long tones. You want to see that, like our Carlos Nakai is an amazing flute player who has these amazing long tones, and it's because he's practiced those over and over again. And that's one of the big foundational keys of the Native American flute playing, is to be able to have a long tone. Creating that long tone that's steady, that is even all the way through, that's a really core foundation of our flute playing. And it's what people really like. It doesn't matter all the fast stuff that you play, that's all kind of coloring, but it's the long tones that people hold on to. So you can do all this type of really craziness. It's those long tones that people love afterwards. So we want to make those long tones as best as possible, and breathing helps with that. It allows us to create a good sense of breath control and ability to create these beautiful long tones that you can work with. So you want to try that, try your breathing exercise as well as create your long tones. So you breathe in for 4, right? 1, 2, 3. We're going to breathe in 4. And hold, and then create. Just go as long as you can, right? That's I wish I was able to play super long tones. I can't anymore. I think the longest I'm able to go maybe is like 20 beats now, or 20, maybe 22 if I'm lucky. But there are people out there who can go for like 30, people who out there can go for 40 because they're able to get that much breath support in and that much breath control. And that's something we want to work towards and create a good sound, is that a kind of long tone sound. And that's where that breath support comes into play. Another thing about the breath, since the instrument is a a breath instrument, it's something that we utilize our breath for. Another thing that we want to look at inside the world of breath support and breath control is the idea of attack. How do we attack the sound? Now, when we talk about attacking the sound, we're not talking about taking the instrument and clobbering someone over the head with it. That's silly. But what we're talking about is actually breathing into the instrument and creating that first sound, that initial sound of the instrument. For the most part, when we start playing, we create what's called a sigh attack. It's us breathing in and we go, and just like we're sighing. Nothing too difficult, nothing too strange. And a sigh attack creates a very calm, soothing attack for the notes. There's really no pronunciation, there's no excess there. It's just a nice little stream of thoughts. Right, very pleasant, very even, very signed. It's what we all start off playing when we first start playing the flute. It's a very much a sigh attack. It's a nice, calm, easy way of going into it. But there are other ways that we can attack the flute or attack the notes and create a different sound, a more distinct sound, something that is kind of unique. And one of these ways is what I call the puff attack. So it's like if you were to just go pa 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 pa, right? Pa pa. Saying the word pa is all we're doing. Pa pa pa. So what I want you to do is take your finger and we're going to put it right in front of our mouth. We're going to go pa. You can hear how that puff feels against your finger, or if you can feel how that puff feels against your finger, and you can hear how that sound is in your ear. Now, take your finger and we're going to rest it right on your bottom lip, and we're going to try the same thing. Now, the difference here is you can't create the attack with your finger there because your lips aren't able to touch. But you can still have that kind of idea inside of the attack, because it's there with the puff of air that's coming through. Now this attack allows a stronger breath of air to go into the flute and then even out into a long form sound. You'll also get this kind of higher note because when you put more air into the flute and more intensity, what will happen is we'll actually try to go into a higher register and create a higher octave note. So you end up getting a higher octave note while that may relax into a lower sound. And that's a cool kind of effect, is the idea of this higher note going to a lower note. And that's all done through this pa attack. And that's the pa attack, is this idea of pushing more air into the flute at one little time and then evening it out. Unlike the sigh, which is all kind of connected, the pa gives a little bit more distinct because you're pushing that sound through. I am breaking up the evenness a little bit because of the way the pa works, but I can also connect back to the evenness after I have that first attack. And that's a different type of attack to learn because it creates a little different type of sound. Another attack to learn on the instrument that's going to help you create yet another unique sound is the do attack. And it's really simple. All you're doing is saying do. Do, 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 do. It's just the same thing over and over again. Do, 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 do. That duh is going to create a much stronger, precise attack to the note. And then you're going to do that ooh. It's just going to help create that sigh to it. you'll hear how that first attack is a little bit harsher. That start is a little bit more precise and a little bit more pronounced than the sigh or the puff, but it still allows us to connect back to the sigh, connect back to that kind of puff feeling afterwards, because we are, we're attacking it stronger and then relaxing a little bit. And that's kind of the nice thing about these attacks, is it just gives us a very first initial sound that's a little bit different. The final attack that I would like to show you is something that's really interesting. It's kind of like it's taken away from I don't know if you ever used to play guns. You take your little pistols and you go do 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 do, or pew 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 pew. The idea here is it's kind of like a space gun effect. You're going to say do, but you're also going to curve in the back of your throat a little high pitched sound that goes do do. So you're going to do this do, just like if you're shooting aliens with your space guns, do 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 do. You're going to take that type of attack, do 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 do, and you're going to put that into the flute. And it's really interesting, because what's going to happen is you're going to have this really kind of interesting whistle precise attack as you do this. So you're going to so we have like our do attack, which is this. We have our do attack. We have our puff attack. And then we have our sigh attack. And all of them create different sounds. Now, the thing about us as performers is we want to create these different sounds. We want to create unique sounds. We want to create sounds that are going to allow us to create our own voices as we are playing the instrument. So the more we learn about different techniques, the more we learn about different types of ideas of how to create the sound, the easier it's going to be for us to actually build our own voice and what it's going to sound like for us to play. And that's important, is to create a voice, to create you as a performer and make you a much better performer out there. We have this amazing instrument, 6 holes, and what we should talk about now is your first scale. How do you play your first scale? Now, jump back real quickly to the idea the 6-hole and the 5-hole flute. We know from the 6-hole and 5-hole flute that this 4th hole here gets covered on the 5-hole flute. And the reason why is to actually help with this first scale. When we are playing the Native American wood flute and we want to create our first scale, we're going to put our finger here. Now we're going to put our top hand here. And the way your top hand and lower hand works is usually it's your strong hand on the bottom and your weak hand on the top. So if you're right-handed, it's going to be right hand on the bottom. And if you're left-handed, it could be left hand on the bottom. If you want to switch it and vary it around, that's entirely up to you. It's good and it's no big deal. But there is a bottom hand and there is a top hand. And that's the thing to understand. On your top hand flute, you're going to keep your 3rd finger anchored. That 4th hole is going to be covered. And then what we do is we're going to put all our fingers on and we're going to move our fingers off one by one, starting on the 1st hole, 2nd hole, 3rd hole. We're going to keep the 4th hole covered, 5th hole, and 6th hole. And then that's going to create our very first scale as we play the flute. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Now that scale is a minor scale, and more importantly, it's a minor pentatonic scale. And what that means is 5 notes. You're only playing 5 notes. Unlike the notes that you play in like a regular scale, which would be 7 notes, this is just a 5-note scale, and it's a minor 5-note scale. It's got a different flavor than what you would consider in the regular major sound. It's a little bit darker, a little bit richer than what you would find in the major sound. Again, it's just pulling each finger off, keeping that anchor finger on. And that's it. That's your first scale. And that's a really pretty scale. It's a minor scale. It's a minor pentatonic scale. And it's something that's really exciting to start off, because all you need to do is pull your fingers off one by one and you can create really cool music, really good music. This is just a song that is just using the minor scale. I'm just moving up and down the scale. Again, super easy, nothing too difficult about that. And all I did was just move my fingers up and down the scale by keeping that one anchor finger there. And that's the thing. That finger now is an anchor finger. It's just stuck there. Just like the 5-hole flute that doesn't have that hole, it's like a permanent anchor finger. It never ever moves. And here we have an anchor finger that just never ever moves. Now, if we have a 5-hole flutes, we can't remove that finger and create other types of sounds that would use that hole. But for the most part, as you're starting off, this is the greatest way to create your first sounds, is by keeping that anchor finger and having that be part of your material, your repertoire, to play as best as possible, is to keep that anchor finger on there. Simple. Now, I'm going to give you one other kind of like little, technique. We can actually change our anchor finger. We can have our anchor finger be on this 4th hole, or we can actually have an anchor finger be on the 3rd hole. So we keep our 3rd hole covered with that 1st finger, and we're just going to move up the scale that way. The 1st hole, 2nd hole, keep that anchor finger, and now we're going to actually remove our 4th hole. Ooh, that's crazy, because we just talked about the anchor finger. 5th hole and 6th hole, and go down. And this is going to create yet another pentatonic scale. It's going to sound a little different, but it's not another scale you can use by just having that anchor finger there. And so here's what that scale sounds like. So it sounds a little different. It doesn't sound as clean as the other one, but it is yet another pentatonic. So if I want to, I'm going to run up with my 1st anchor finger. I'm going to then go back down. I'm going to run up and use my 2nd anchor finger, run back down, and then close by running up with my 1st anchor finger and coming back down. So here's that kind of pattern. And you can create interesting music that way, just by keeping these anchor fingers into your flute. And that's really kind of the beginning of how most people learn how to play the flute, is by creating these anchor fingers and just running up and down scales, running up and down patterns, using different patterns, going and covering the fingers in different variations, but still utilizing those same type of scale techniques, is these anchor fingers that you have, which is really kind of cool and really kind of fun. And that is one of the very first things that you need to do in order to sound like a professional, is just be able to play up and down these 2 different types of scales and combine them in different ways. One of the final things I want to share with you, and I know there's 5 and we've only covered 3, but so this is the 4th one, is this idea of what we call a pull off or a hammer on. And it's the idea that these 2 fingers up here, the 1st and 2nd fingers, can be used in a really interesting way. I can play a solid note and just release that real quickly, and it's going to create a kind of a hidden note effect. So I'm going to play a note. Wow, that's not coming out very well. Let's try the other one. Now, what you're seeing is me actually just pull off this finger right here really quickly. My 2nd finger is not working as well, but my 1st finger I'm just pulling off really quickly, and it's creating like kind of like I said, this kind of hidden note above effect. And that's something that we see a lot inside Native American music, is you'll hear this kind of hidden ghost effect, or this hidden note effect, where there'll be a long tone that someone's playing, and it's broken up by this little kind of just this little hidden note. And that's just produced by taking your finger and just moving it off real quickly and covering it back up. You're not doing a long thing. You're not going ba-dum. It's just ba-dum, 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 real quick, right? And that's going to create this kind of hidden note effect, which is something that you can just add at the end of notes or at the beginning of notes and make it sound a little bit more unique, a little bit more different than what you would hear in other instrumentations.
Oh, he's back. You disconnected for a bit.
Oh, did I? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Uh
yeah,
oh.
no, it's fine. It's
Uh
fine.
oh. That's never good.
I think it was
Okay.
like 30
But I'm back now,
seconds.
right?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. So did you hear about the hidden note thing?
Yeah,
So so
yeah,
so yeah, the little doom. Okay, cool. So yeah, sorry about that. Didn't mean to disconnect. But that
fine.
yeah. So it's a kind of hidden note thing. Uh, and it's that type of oddity that makes the flute just so interesting. It's so unique because yeah, you can do grace notes and other instruments, but they tend to be a lot more pronounced. With the flute, that's the Native American flute. It's such a unique thing to the Native American flute. It's such a core identity of the flute that you have these little hidden notes, these grace notes that are being played all over the place that allows you to create a much cooler line of thought, a much cooler train of idea that connects the music together and makes you be much more pronounced. The final thing that I would say, the number one tip, probably that's the most important thing for me to convey to you, is get out there and start playing. Um, just start playing. Play as much as possible and play what you feel at the time. Use ideas like I share with you with the attacks and with scales and with different notes that you're going to learn as you keep going on to help influence how you perform, but perform how you feel. This instrument is all about the player. It's all about how you, as a player, feel at the time. Do I feel happy? Do I feel sad? Do I feel angry? Do I feel, joy? Is this like the most beautiful thing in the world? Is this the most harshest thing in the world? And the instrument itself can convey that no matter what's going on inside of you. It can convey the turmoil, it can convey the joy, it can spark all sorts of great things about it. And that's the cool thing about this instrument, is that it's able to create amazing sounds for you that really helps you convey what you feel at the moment, whether it is full of happiness and joy, full of sadness and despair, that you can get it out through this instrument. And you playing it is the most important thing. I can't tell you enough how much you need to create your own dictionary, your own language using the flute. Music is a language. Music conveys messages, speaks to people in ways that just other things can't. Maybe you can't say what you want to in words, but you can say it in music. Same type of thing with every art. Every art is some sort of language of communication to someone, whether it is a visual thing that this is how I'm feeling or how I want to represent something, or an auditory thing and this is what's going on. The artist is communicating and the recipient is receiving that message. Now, they may receive it completely different than how you're communicating, and that's the idea of communication anyways. Language itself is very volatile and kind of disruptive in that fashion, because you could be saying one thing and they're hearing another, and then all of a sudden arguments arise. But regardless of that, the idea that you can convey something through an instrument is really important, and that music is a language that you can start saying things and start communicating is also really vitally important. And you can't be an effective communicator unless you start communicating. Just like anyone will tell you in any medium, you can't be good at it unless you're doing it. So if you want to become like sounding like a professional as best as possible, pick up the instrument and start playing it. Start communicating, start learning your language, and then learning how to voice new ideas and new thoughts and conversations inside that language. And that's what the world needs right now. We need more than anything at this moment, we need people to be speaking great messages, saying really cool things, because it's kind of disruptive in the environment that we're in. The world is we're in turmoil, and we need things of positivity, and we need things of hope, and we need things to connect, allow us to connect to feelings of maybe angst or anxiety or whatever else is out there. We just need that stuff that's for us to be able to understand and realize that we're not alone, but also feel that feeling of hope, because that's the more important thing that we need more than anything in the world. Is we need to be able to respect and hope and care about each other. So the Native American wood flute. Apologize for getting cut off there and not broadcasting as much as possible, but that's really much it. There's those type of 5 ideas of the Native American wood flute. First, breathing, learning how to breathe, learning how to control that breath and have the best support. Second, learning how to attack notes so that you're creating your own sound, your own identity, and how you can change and alter that sound and identity as you're moving through the music. Third, learning your scale, how to organize notes into something that people will understand and appreciate and admire is really important. Just playing random stuff here and there is a little bit more disconcerting and not really as connective as it can be as just being able to organize it. So that first scale, that anchor finger, being able to replace that anchor finger and having that kind of structure involved is really important. Fourthly, also having these kind of flourishes, adding your own ideas to what can be played inside the songs, and creating again your own voice, your own materials. And then finally, just getting out there and playing. That's really important, man. Just go out and do it. Don't wait until you're perfect at something to go present it. Just go present it. Just go do it, because people are going to admire you, and the more you go out and do it, the better you're going to become at it, and also the more confidence you're going to get, the better you're going to be able to play, the better you're going to be able to perform, and people are going to be really receptive to that. So those are my 5 things about the Native American wood flute, and I hope you maybe learned something while I was talking.
Yeah, thank you. I
Oh, no
learned
problem.
a lot. I was like trying to really concentrate.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's just that sometimes it takes me a while to like learn something. So most of the time I'm like, yeah. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much. It was really cool seeing the different type of flutes, like especially that big one, that
Oh yeah,
big flute.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's
Can we
like I
hear a note from it?
sure. Yeah, no problem. This is a really fun flute. I'm not very good at the long ones because you actually
Oh,
have to you'll see the hole's really big and my fingers don't necessarily
yeah,
cover all
yeah.
of them
And
as
your
well, but I
hands
will
have
try
to
my
move.
best.
Okay.
So yeah, these are the bass flutes, and these I don't recommend anyone starting off with a bass flute. They take so much air support. They take so much breath
Yeah.
control. These
And like
suckers.
holding it,
Oh
transporting it,
yeah.
probably
It,
trying
it
to buy one is probably trouble too.
Yeah, so I actually I really love this one company. I'm by no means sponsored by them or anything like that, but I really love this one company called High Spirits Flutes, and they have all these ranges of flutes out there. The very first flute I bought is from High Spirits. It's this A flute, and this is the one I recommend for most people when they're starting to like play for the first time. I say go get the A Sparrowhawk flute from High Spirits Flutes. It is a great beginning flute, great starter flute, because the finger holes are easy and it's so much easier to play. And A is by far the easiest key to pick up because it adapts very well to other instruments. So yeah, and they're the ones where I bought the bass flutes from. I actually have 3 bass flutes: an F sharp, a G, and
Oh.
an A, because I like playing around it. I have about 30 flutes in total, maybe a
Hmm.
little more. But yeah,
Okay. Did you want to start the Q&A?
yeah, sure.
Or
No, I would.
oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. So I know we have 2 people in the audience, is Paul and guest 6914. If any of you two want to like, shoot some questions out in the messages, I can read them out for Enoch and then we'll go over them. I know my question got answered about the bass flute. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. No
Yeah.
problem. There's also other flutes too. I have this one I didn't show. This is something that's also very like
Whoa.
a native thing. It's called droning. one flute has the holes on it, while the other flute doesn't have any holes on it. And you can actually buy flutes that have other holes, but they'll usually put leather over it. But this is called drone flutes. And another kind of very, very traditional native thing that we will have one sound, one tone, and then play over it. Again, that's a lot of breath support to try to get this so that you're having the two tones sound even. But it's yet another one that's very familiar to Native American flute players, is we have these drone flutes. I actually have one that's up in my cabinet here that is a 3 drone flute. It has
that's intense.
Yeah, 2 drones in one, and yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Lot of fun to play. Very tiring to play.
Yeah.
At the end
Everyone's
of it,
you're like, more, you know, you're just over here like, I can't breathe.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like,
I'm glad you enjoy it, but I can't breathe. Give me a minute.
Yeah. So, but they're definitely good instruments out there to have fun with and playing and everything like that. So,
yeah, I have a uncle that does flute playing. I'm not sure if he still does it, but I remember seeing it and thinking like, oh, what an interesting shape, with like the inlays, the fetishes and stuff. And then when I was in Japan, I also got the chance to see like shaku hachi players, and it never occurred to me that both of them were really similar until you mentioned it, and then I was like, oh, maybe that's why I like the shakuhachi so much, because it reminds me of the Native American flute.
I mean, it's to say we could trace ancestry back, right? So the Pacific Northwest region and where some of this Native American flute influence came from, we know at some point that there was some migration pattern that came over the Bering Strait, which makes sense that the shakuhachi and the Native American wood flute really do have a lot of similarities in common, because we actually do share some ancestry there. Over that. So it's cool to see. I know a lot when I go into schools and I play for students at schools, that they will, a lot of the kids would be like, wow, that sounds a lot like, and they'll say some like Mulan or some Disney movie or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, it's there's a reason for it.
There's a connection.
But then I go like, well, what about like, Brother Bear or Pocahontas? And then I realized, they actually didn't play that much Native American wood flute in those, and those are actually shakuhachis inside there. Never mind, kids. Don't worry about that.
Don't worry about it. It's fine. Don't think about it too much. Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a lot of, I mean, it's very calming, and they also are built off of that pentatonic scale. Both of them are built off of that pentatonic scale, which is a very easy scale that allows every note to be played on it to connect with every other note. So unlike the normal major scales that we have, which we would consider like diatonic scales, 7-note scales, the pentatonic scale, every note together sounds good with each other. It would be like you taking the keyboard and just playing the black notes. I don't know if you've ever done that, but if you open up a keyboard,
I used to,
right, and you just play the black notes, every black note sounds good together. You can pound whatever you want to out of it and sound like an amazing musician just by playing the black notes, because pentatonic scale, the black notes are designed that way to be something that just sounds good together. So mixing and matching flutes where you can just play the pentatonic scales over and over again with each other allows the multiple flutes to be able to play and still sound good together with each doing individual things, which is kind of nice. And it's just a very easy scale. It's also a very mathematically sound scale. It's one of the very first scales mathematically around that you can actually calculate and go, okay, here's why this works better. And but don't want to get into that. That's too crazy for the time being.
No, I took a musical composition class in high school, and the amount of math that was involved, I was like, this was fun until I had to start using math. But the concept behind it, and the fact that, It's just like the accessibility of the Native American flute. It always seemed like such a far away thing, but after listening to your talk and seeing the demonstrations, it's like, okay, it's not as hard as I thought compared
No,
to like a harp or something.
exactly, right. And
Yeah.
even like the piano, that's the one that everyone starts off with, right? You have to
Hmm.
put your fingers on the piano, and all of a sudden you're playing in a do do do, under da 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 da, over da 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 da. Okay, that's my scale. Man, it's
Hmm.
nothing like that. It's just pulling your fingers off, keeping that anchor finger there, and you're off and running, and it is great. um, I kind of liken it. I don't know if I said this. I usually do. I kind of liken it to the game like chess or the game Othello, where it's super easy to pick up. Right, you can learn how to play in like 5 minutes,
Yeah.
but it takes a lifetime to master.
Yeah.
To say that you are a great sound at it, that it's the most amazing thing in the world. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
going to take you forever to get through to that point where you're professionally sounding all over the place and universally accepted as that. But it's so easy to pick up. It's so easy to get in. I have part of the stuff that we're doing over at Native Music Enthusiasts by creating materials and compositions for people to learn and get better and to improve. One of the things that we're looking at is creating bundles that we can sell to schools to have them
Hmm.
learn the Native American wood flute as their beginning instruments to get into music
Yeah.
and replace the recorder,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't
Done
like
what?
the recorder because it's very squeaky. The
Yeah.
best squeaks you get out of the flute are the long tones, and so it's really nice because you don't have that same type of squeak. But you can also very easily learn a lot of these really cool music principles from the beginning by just picking up the flute and playing through it. So we actually are putting together bundles where we can sell to schools and say, hey, would you be interested in having 30 flutes with 30 books and materials and how to learn how to play music with this type of system? And some
Hmm.
people are really excited about it, and some people are kind of going, well, that's really interesting. Let's talk as you kind of adapt more. My goal would be to say, hey America, let's pick up an American instrument
Yeah.
instead of using a European instrument.
Yeah.
Let's look up a really cool native instrument and actually use that for music and see where we can go from there, because I think it's a great instrument to start playing.
Yeah. And then, by doing that, you're kind of integrating the indigenous culture with a wider audience, and then maybe it will just make people, go like, oh, I want to learn more about these people,
Yeah, right.
and I think it would be a great teaching implementation. It's not that different from the quarter. I mean, it's still different, but I think it would be easier to integrate. I
Yeah,
think
and
kids
and
would probably get more excited.
that's the thing that I'm excited about is the idea of raising awareness, right?
Hmm.
To say that the native culture is kind of underrated, I think is an exaggeration. I mean, I think we're known about, but we're definitely not in like the top 5 cultures of the United States that people recognize.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I
unfortunately, yeah.
I actually did a survey a number of years ago just to see like what people thought, and you have to understand, I'm the one giving the survey. Talk a lot about being native and enjoying that world, and I gave the survey say, hey, list the top 5 cultures that you guys know right now, or you would say that are predominant in America, and out of like 20 people I asked, only 2 of them actually included Native American inside of the survey, and I'm the one who
Mhm.
asked them. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, hey,
Yeah.
okay, because I do think it's we're known about. There are instances where it's a lot more recognized, like the Dapple situation that happened a couple years ago, right? People
Mhm.
can't start, hey, wow, Standing Rock, we're there with you, but a couple years later, Standing Who, like we kind of get
It's
put
like,
back.
oh, I thought that was done
Yeah,
with, you
right.
know,
You're
like
still
how many
fighting.
people know about the indigenous occupation of Alcatraz, or how many
Exactly.
people know about Wounded Knee or Sachin Littlefeather at the Academy Awards? It's like really big bursts of, oh wow, those people are still here, and then it's like, dun, 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 dun.
Right. And so that's the
Yeah.
idea is if we can help raise awareness, it's not necessarily stepping into the spotlight or trying to be like a predominant type of thing, which yay or nay. It's just letting people know that there are these so different, unique cultures inside of this one identity. that I think is really important to understand and really important to realize.
Hmm.
And I find it really intriguing that we all get lumped together, right? When you say Native American, there is this, weird picture in the mind of it's plains Indians riding on horses, killing buffalo, maybe doing sand paintings, and potentially like carving birch bark canoes, right?
Yeah,
There,
and
it's
then it's
kind of
like
you
like
just
a
mix.
conglomerate.
Yeah, that's a mixed
Yeah.
mash of like five different cultures you just did right there.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
I don't know any native like that.
yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because it's weird to say, hey, there are these people over in the New England area that are completely different than people who are in the Southwest area and completely different than the plains, and and people are just we all just get lumped together because that's what John Wayne was killing and supporting inside the surgeries, right? I mean, we that's the
Power
identity
of
of
media.
and which is a little short-sighted. I'm not going to
Hmm.
lie, and a little upsetting, a little disappointing that they don't see that there are these amazing things that happen all over the place. And so that's the hope with the raising awareness that we're trying to do
Hmm.
is create more understanding that there are these other cultures out there, and maybe help create support to identify the differences in the regions and the differences in the community, because like your story and my story each other. Where I grew up, the stuff that I was learning about is a lot different than the experiences we've had because of the regions that we grew up in.
Hmm.
And that's good. That's cool. That's the beauty of it all. But it does make me go, let's raise awareness about all these different types of ideas and thoughts, and let people see something more. Is the hope? Fingers crossed.
And then, I think that's what I was trying to do with like, Indigi-Show was just show just this broad scope of indigenous creatives, different tribes, different media. So, kind of like one step forward.
Right. Right, and
Yeah.
I think that stuff is so important. There was a great comment made by John Proudstar at the Indigenous Comic Con a couple of years ago when I went. They were talking about, I can't remember exactly what the panel was, but it was Proudstar, Jeff Reggie, Washoya Alviatre, and someone else on the panel.
Hmm.
And the question was asked, like, what does like the Native American culture need in order to be seen more as an equal player
Hmm.
on the line with everybody else inside the world. I think it was media, not necessarily comics, but just like,
Media in general.
yeah, media in general.
Yeah.
And his comment was really, really interesting, and it piqued a lot of interest inside of me, being a person who works in business and marketing. He said Native Americans need a marketing plan. We
Mm.
need a way to unify the message about who we are, what we do, and what we represent that can be spread across the country and raise awareness in that fashion. Because we really
Hmm.
don't have that. We are seen right now as people who run casinos, and we're seen right now as people who are out there in the world, but not necessarily like a big part of everything like that. And I
Yeah.
thought that's a really interesting concept. The idea of a marketing plan for the culture, how can that be created? Uh, and that's kind of things that, in my mind, as I create projects that are to help awareness or help raise understanding, is kind of trying to help, like you're doing with the Indigi-Show, kind of unify that
Hmm.
message that we're out there and try to raise more awareness of the different aspects of culture that are there,
Yeah.
because it's just important. So
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
I guess I did so well. No one has a question, or no one has something
I
they want to
mean,
ask.
I know for our two guests, there should be like a pull-out menu for the messages. I know it may be hard to see on the page. It's going to look like two cartoon bubbles. One is white, one is orange, and then you just pull it out. And there's messages. But if no one has any questions, I guess we can wait like another 5 minutes to see if someone
Sure.
has one. Yeah. Yeah, marketing. I think. Yeah. I kind of brought up that one project of like a short film that came out, a couple years ago. And I couldn't help but think if they had like a really good marketing person or if they had like a really good marketing campaign, even if it was like an email newsletter or social media or even a blog, I think it definitely could have spread awareness about their project.
Yeah,
And
right. And
yeah.
that's, again, it's kind of one of those weird things that, because I'm going to say this incorrectly, so I apologize if I offend anybody now or future by what I'm going to say. Um, the indigenous community gets really tight knit. There's
Mm,
people who know each other really well,
yeah.
and I think that's awesome. But those pockets tend to be isolated
Hmm.
and don't necessarily spread out as much as we would hope.
Yeah. It's
Right?
just,
I think that's the nature of everything. It's not necessarily this isn't just a problem for the native community. It's the nature of everything in general. But the idea it would be try to create spaces that allow those pockets to deal with other. That's why I was so excited to be able to, when you guys accepted me to say, oh, cool. Uh, as a musician, I'd love to intermingle with this other type of um, visual space because
hmm
I think there's a lot of overlap between what you guys do and what I do,
yeah.
even though they kind of seem a little bit separate. But arts is art. Um,
Hmm.
and especially nowadays with the big push of modern school to move into the idea of STEM. Everything
Hmm.
is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's always STEM. It's always STEM. But the
Yeah.
best STEM proponents say that we're missing a letter, that it should be STEAM and not just STEM. Um, but there seems to be this major push that if you're not doing something with computers, then you're missing out on being productive in the world. And
Hmm.
I think that's just a flaw, um, because the beautiful thing about arts, more so than science, technology, engineering, or math, the beautiful thing about the arts community is you are constantly creating something. You're
Hmm.
using the tools that you learn from science, technology, engineering, or math, and using that to help create things. So science is about discovery. Technology is about using, the newer and cooler electronic techniques to create worlds and design we have in our head using technology to do it. Right? It's what's going to be the next engineering thing or what's going to be the next web thing or something like that. Engineering allows you to create the structures, allows you to create the buildings and the bridges and the other type of foundations to make life better. And math just holds it all together. But it's the arts where we're constantly creating, where creativity exists, that allows people to take all these other different facets of life that we're learning and create our own voices, create our own ideas. The
Hmm.
stories that tell, the stories that I tell, the stories that other people tell in the arts world is all built upon the experiences that we have, the life that we are trying to convey, and the visions that we want other people to see. And that's all part of the arts world and this creative aspect that is drastically missing from the STEM ideologies. So it would be nicer to try to incorporate that as we move forward. I have no idea why I went down this train of thought. I apologize, but
No, it's fine. I think it kind of goes into this broader question of like of how art is so important and even within like the mainstream like Western society, it's like STEM gets like, like STEM, 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 kind of like what you said. And the same thing happened to me when I was in college. People are like, why are you doing art? And it's like, because it's what I want to do, like, and, graduating with this degree, I ended up working like so many different jobs. Like, someone told me like, oh, you're going to make like an online convention featuring different types of artists and different types of people from different tribes, I would be like, what? How did I do that?
great. But a
Yeah.
lot of that is because of you wanting to create that world of like you said, the connective tissue. That here's all these different cool things that are happening over here. Let's put it into a place that people can see. Um,
Mhm.
and which is utilizing technology and yes, utilizing other parts of the STEM world, but it really is just like an overseen it's just an overseen idea right now. I have a lot of musician friends who who are seeing the same type of problems in the world. They want to push forward their own agendas, whether it be like jazz or rock or whatever it is. But they're seeing that the world is conforming itself more to this one overarching philosophy of STEM or whatever you want to call it, and the arts are being pushed lower and lower. Except for like the mainstream arts, right? We still have our Taylor
Mm-hmm.
Swifts. We're still going to have our Jay-Z's and the people who are multimillionaires and have the huge fan followings, but we are
Mm-hmm.
we are missing out on like the world of the indie stuff, like the indie comics, the indie um, films, like you talked about and mentioned, the indie music scene. All that stuff is kind of getting pushed because it's just not as prevalent, or maybe not as people think as the next
Profitable.
profitable is, I guess, another good word. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently working on with some friends of mine the idea of different types of plays and playwrights where we might be able to put on productions and things, because theater is such a amazing art form that we just don't right. It's kind of getting pushed by the wayside as well. If you're
Mm-hmm.
not if you're not the Hamiltons of the world who really cares type thing, it's like, oh man, there's so much good stuff out there. And we need it. We need the different stories. We need the different tellings. We need the different ideas out there because it helps create individuals as we grow up.
Yeah.
So
Hmm. Yeah, I think we may have just answered all the questions for the guests then. Looks like.
or they just did,
Um,
or we just they just didn't have any questions. They just were like, yeah.
they covered everything. It's fine. Yeah.
But
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah, if you want to conclude, we can, or if
okay.
there's one more thing you wanted to mention.
Let's see. If I had any last thoughts, um, man, well, I think my final thought would be, for anyone out there who is wanting to just experiment or try or do something, go out there and just start. And criticism's going to come. It's always going to happen, and it doesn't matter. That doesn't really matter. You're going to get positive, you're going to get negative feedback, no matter whatever it is you do, whether it is playing sports or whether it's going to be art world or whether it's going to be anything. The big thing is try, and don't give up on yourself if things become a little bit of a struggle. You may not necessarily change the world, but the little impact that you do is going to change the life of somebody. And I think that's a big key that I found out for me. That's the most important, is that I'm not necessarily going out and changing the world, but I do know that I have helped a couple people learn more and adapt more and understand more. And I think that's the most important thing, is don't worry about changing the world. Just go out and do whatever you can to create more of yourself, because the world needs you. They need more of you out there. And your impact may not be the Hiroshima of the art world, but it may be enough to affect two or more people who could be the of the art world. And that's really where the power of your voice comes into play, is go out, start doing, start commanding, start being presenting, and people are going to love you for you being you. And I think that's the most important part.
Hmm, thank you. Some good words. Well, that was Enoch Chapman. Thank you so much for speaking, being a speaker at Indigi-Show. Oh, can't even talk. Thank you for being a speaker at Indigi-Show. It was a really great session, and this will be recorded and then uploaded later. So yeah,
Thank you.
look forward. You're welcome. Look forward to the rest of the schedule today. If you don't know the schedule, it should be on the website. And look forward to the raffle prizes. Enoch donated one. It's one of the Kestrel F sharp flutes with a book on Native American flute playing. So if you bought tickets for that, look forward to the announcement of the winners. And other than that, everyone have a good rest of your morning. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
See ya.